Somewhere in a rainforest, something almost a foot long is moving through the leaf litter. Dozens of legs, venomous fangs loaded, built to kill in a single strike. It's not a snake, it's a giant centipede. And this thing doesn't just survive out here. It hunts frogs, lizards, snakes, even bats snatched out of midair. Now picture it wandering into the wrong patch of ground, home to 1,000 fire ants, and every one of them is about to defend the colony. On paper, 1,000 against one sounds like it's already over. But this predator has never lost to anything a fraction of its size. Not once. So can raw numbers actually beat something built to kill instantly? Let's find out. Let's start with the version everyone assumes happens. The centipede is already hunting. It picks off ants one at a time, grabs one, strikes with its forciples, injects venom straight into the nerve cluster behind its head, and the ant is dead before it can even release an alarm scent. One down, then another, and another. Ants forage alone or in small groups most of the time. So if the centipede is patient and picks its targets carefully, it could wipe out dozens of them before the colony even realizes it's under attack. In this version, there's no battle at all, just a predator having a very easy meal. But that's the boring outcome, and it only works if the ants never figure out what's happening. Here's the thing about fire ants. They don't fight alone for long. The moment one ant is attacked, it releases an alarm pheromone. Within seconds, that chemical signal spreads, and nearby workers don't just notice, they swarm toward the source. This is how fire ant colonies have always dealt with threats too big for one ant to handle. So the real fight isn't a lone centipede versus a lone ant. It's a lone centipede versus an entire colony that just declared war on it. And that changes everything. So before we get into how this plays out on the ground, let's look at exactly what each side is bringing to this fight, because the mismatch here is bigger than you'd think. Just maybe not in the direction you'd guess. The giant centipede, species like Scolopendra gigantea, the Amazonian giant centipede, can grow past a foot long and weigh close to 400 grams. It moves at around 2 miles an hour, which sounds slow, but for something that size, it's fast enough to snatch prey out of the air. Its main weapon is a pair of modified front legs called forcipules, venomous pincers that inject neurotoxins straight into the muscles, heart, and nervous system of its prey. In the wild, this thing eats frogs, lizards, birds, snakes, and small mammals, and it can live over 10 years. Almost nothing preys on a full-grown one except a handful of specialists. Certain snakes, larger birds, mongooses, and cats. On its own turf, it's close to untouchable. Now the fire ants. A single worker weighs somewhere between 0.5 milligram and 6 milligrams, so light you could barely feel one land on your hand. Its venom is a cytotoxin, meaning it destroys cells on contact. And unlike a bee, a fire ant can sting over and over without dying. Alone, it's nothing. But a single colony can hold up to 300,000 workers in one mound. And they're documented going after animals many times their size, when those animals can't get away. So on one side, a single, precise, almost untouchable killing machine. On the other, an army that can call in reinforcements by the thousands. Here's the catch though. One-on-one, this isn't close. A single fire ant sting barely registers to something the size of a centipede. But one hit from the centipede's forcipools is enough to kill an ant almost instantly. Its venom is built to shut down the nervous system of things much bigger than an ant. So if this were a fair fight, one at a time, the centipede could probably kill hundreds of ants before it even broke a sweat. Numbers alone don't automatically win. You need to actually be able to use them. But here's where it gets interesting. Let's actually do the math. A fire ant worker weighs a few milligrams. Multiply that by 1,000, and the entire ant force weighs somewhere between 0.5 gram and 6 grams total. The centipede on its own can weigh up to 400 grams. Even being generous to the ants, their combined weight is well under 2% of the centipede's. If this were about strength versus strength, it wouldn't just be one-sided. It would be a joke. But raw mass was never the point. 1,000 ants aren't one big, slow animal. There are 1,000 separate attack points that can surround a single target from every direction at once. And that's something a centipede, with one head, one set of forcipules, and legs that only move in certain directions, was never built to defend against. And terrain decides almost everything here. In open ground, the centipede has the advantage. It can sense ants coming from a distance, strike the closest ones, and retreat before it's surrounded. Out in the open, this becomes a hunting exercise, not a battle. But move this fight closer to the ant's own territory, into leaf litter, tunnels, or right next to the mound, and the advantage flips. There's no open ground to retreat across. Every direction leads to more ants. The centipede's speed, its biggest asset in the open, becomes almost useless in a maze only the ants know how to navigate. This is exactly the kind of ground fire ants are used to fighting on. It's their house. So how would the ants actually pull this off? Not by rushing in head-on. That's suicide. And ants aren't built for suicide missions. They're built for efficiency. Fire ants attack the way they always do, from every blind spot at once. A few approach from the front, almost as bait, holding the centipede's attention on one direction. Meanwhile, others climb the legs, the antennae, the joints, the places where the exoskeleton is thinnest and most flexible, built for movement, not defense. Individually, each sting barely matters. But cytotoxic venom doesn't need to be powerful to be dangerous. It needs to add up. Dozens of stings become hundreds. Hundreds become an overwhelming dose. The centipede's body was never built to process all at once. Meanwhile, its own weapon can only strike one target at a time. Every second it spends killing one ant is a second 3 more spend climbing higher. And this isn't just theory. Fire ants are documented attacking animals far bigger than themselves whenever those animals can't escape. Ground-nesting bird chicks, newborn livestock, lizards caught in the wrong spot at the wrong time. It's usually not one dramatic bite that does it. It's dozens of ants stinging at once, over and over, until the target simply can't function anymore. A giant centipede is faster and far more dangerous than any of those animals. But the mechanism that would take it down, if it ever happened, would look exactly the same. Now here's the real problem for the centipede: time. Every strike costs energy. Every ant it kills is one it had to physically reach, grab, and inject venom into. And venom glands aren't unlimited. The more it fights, the more it tires, and the slower and less accurate those strikes become. The ants don't have that problem. If 100 of them die trying to bring it down, the colony doesn't even notice. It has up to 300,000 workers back at the mound, and the alarm pheromone keeps pulling in more the entire time the fight is happening. The centipede is fighting a war of attrition against an enemy that can replace its losses faster than it can create them. And in a war of attrition, the side with more soldiers left standing usually decides how it ends. And here's a twist most people don't expect. When centipedes feel threatened, they have a defense trick. They wave their spiny rear legs around, almost like a second head, to confuse a predator about which end to attack. It works great against a single confused bird or snake trying to figure out where the real bite is coming from. But it does nothing against a swarm attacking from every side simultaneously. There's no wrong end to trick when there's no single direction the danger is coming from. A trick built for one-on-one encounters becomes useless the moment the fight becomes many against one. On top of that, a centipede, like most arthropods, breathes through small openings along its body called spiracles. Get enough ants climbing and stinging across its length at once, and its ability to just physically function starts breaking down, not from any single attack, but from being covered. So who actually wins? If this fight happens out in the open, fast, before the alarm spreads, the centipede wins easily. It could kill dozens, maybe hundreds of ants, and simply walk away with venom to spare, barely slowed down. But if the fight happens on the ants' terms, close to the mound, in tight terrain, with no room to retreat, the odds flip hard. The centipede can't be everywhere at once. It can't outrun a threat that surrounds it from every side. And it can't outproduce an enemy that never runs out of replacements. Eventually, exhaustion and cumulative venom do what no single ant ever could. Realistically, nobody's run this exact matchup in a lab. This is where documented behavior turns into reasoned extrapolation. But based on how fire ant colonies are actually observed fighting, swarming, overwhelming, and consuming animals that can't escape, position and numbers end up mattering more than venom potency. Not because a single ant is dangerous, because a lone predator, however well armed, can only be in one place at a time. And if the centipede does go down, nothing goes to waste. Fire ants aren't just fighters, they're scavengers too. Within hours, the same colony that brought it down would strip the body for protein and haul the pieces back to the mound, feeding the next generation of workers. The predator that spent its whole life hunting everything smaller than itself becomes the meal. So, 1,000 ants versus one giant centipede. Not the blowout everyone expects, and not exactly a fair fight either. It just depends whose ground you're standing on. If you want to see another impossible-sounding matchup, check out the video on screen right now. Thanks for watching.